Okay, we have all five present here for a forum. So I'm Ken Swanton, I'm the vice chair of the sorry, I'm getting feedback in my ear. Turn this thing off. Okay. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the zoning board of appeals. We'll start by taking attendance. So we'll call the roll. Mr. Belial. Here. Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Shagnon.
Here.
Ms. Gow.
Here.
And I, Ken Swanton, am here. So that's five. We will be the five voting members on all topics tonight. Which gets us to the first topic, which is 14. I understand we have a request. So you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Lisa needs me telling costs on behalf of the applicants. They request a continuance to the January 9th meeting.
Okay. All right, a request has been made to continue this until January 9th. Does anybody make a motion?
I will move that the request for continuance to January 9, 2024 for 14 Payson Street application for special permit for nonconformities, BNC 23-22 being approved.
I'll second that.
Good. All right, it's been moved and seconded. It was seconded by Mr. Delisle. By the way, our note taker is not feeling well tonight. She's listening in via the electronic system here. So anyway, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do the roll. Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Shagnon.
Yes.
Ms. Gow.
Yes.
And I vote yes. It's unanimous, 5-0. That gets us to our next topic, which is the hearing for 443 Merrimack. And we'll start by giving the applicant a chance to present it. Then we'll have public comment, and then the board will ask its questions. So we'll start with, you have the floor, Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Lisa Mead, telling the cost of 30 Green Street in Newburyport on behalf of O&G Development LLC, who are the owners of the property. And with me this evening is Eileen Graff, who is the architect on the project as well, and my colleague Ben Taylor, who has also worked on this project. The property is at 443 Merrimack Street in the R2 zoning district. This is at the corner of Plummer and Merrimack. It's the eastern corner of Plummer and Merrimack. The applicant proposes to remove an existing one-story rear addition, or actually there are two different additions in the rear, and construct a new addition to the rear of the structure opposite Merrimack Street, that rear, so to speak, the natural rear as opposed to the zoning ordinance rear, as well as construct a compliant accessory garage structure on the property. There is currently a single-family home, which will be also a single-family home when the project is completed. There's no Form B for this structure, nor is the structure in the district data sheets. According to the assessor's record, the structure was constructed around 1850, and according to the information we found in the registry of deeds, it looks like between 1840 and 1878. Because the left rear addition appeared to be older and closer to original to the structure, and because we're proposing to remove it, we did go to the Historic Commission for demolition review. The Historic Commission approved the plans and released the demolition delay, which allowed us to come to the board this evening. This is a corner lot, and the primary front yard is that which is on Plummer Avenue, and the secondary front yard is on Merrimack Street. Before I review the nonconformities, I just want to point out and acknowledge that prior to this meeting, a couple of weeks ago, we received comments from one of the abutters, the abutter up on Plummer. They had a disagreement related to the property line between the two properties. Our surveyor went back out and found some more monumentation, and it also on Plummer as well as up across from at the, adjacent property. And there was a revision closer to, but not quite exactly, of what that, abutter thought that the line was. So we did submit revised plans and a revised matrix to the board that reflects that. As a result of that, and not as a result of that, but in recognition of that, the lot area for this property is 7,016 square feet, where 10,000 square feet are required. The primary front yard setback is 16.4 feet, where 25 feet is required. Secondary front yard setback is 8.8, where 25 feet is required. And the rear yard setback, that's opposite Plummer, is 6.5, where 25 is required. And as I said, the applicant proposes to remove the two additions on the rear. If you could go to the next slide, please. And I also indicated there was a roof line change. We received the approval for that. Because this addition is more than 500 square feet, we are here to seek a special permit for nonconformities from the board. If you could go to the next slide, please. So on this slide, you orient yourself, the bottom of the slide is Merrimack Street, and running up along the right side of the property or the westerly side of the property is Plummer. The proposed new addition is in the peachish color. You can see the existing rear additions in the back that are proposed to be removed. One of them extends beyond the main box of the existing structure. So you can see that the proposed addition, and Eileen will go over this, steps in from the corners on the back. And then you can see the proposed garage to the rear or the side, if you will, of the structure. You can go to the next slide, please. So we took some photographs. This is a closer view from Merrimack Street. You can see that addition in the rear that's going to be removed. It sticks out from the side. Nothing on this front changes. Eileen will go over that on the proposed conditions. Next slide, please. And here is across the street on Merrimack Street. Same view, just a little further away. Next slide, please. And directly across the street on Merrimack. Next slide. And then this is looking at the base of Plummer, looking towards the southeast. Next slide, please. And then up Plummer. Next slide. And then this is directly across the street on Plummer. And you can see the other part of that rear addition is proposed to be removed. Next slide, please. And then this is the rear where those additions are. And the new additions proposed to be constructed. Next slide, please. And here's the backyard. Eileen will go into the details a little bit more about why that addition needs to be removed, but the historic commission agreed with that. Next slide, please. Excuse me, and then a little bit further in the rear, it's pretty deep lot. Next slide, please. And this is further back in the rear. And with that, I'll turn it over to Eileen to go over the architectural drawings.
Is 124 off the table now for January 9th? High Street?
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it-
Yeah.
That's so late?
that's later in tonight's agenda.
Okay, sorry. Sorry to interrupt. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. Continue.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. The photographs were really helpful, hopefully for you to see the original structure. So really, when we approached this project design-wise, we really wanted to preserve that original structure. It's simple form. It's only 15 feet wide, simple gable, essentially two rooms wide and then two above. So with that, our addition wants to be respectful of this form. And what you can see on the top left, again, existing is on the top two drawings, top of the drawing, and then proposed is on the bottom. So if you look to the top left, that's the existing front elevation facing Merrimack Street. And you can see that one-story addition to the left of it. On the bottom left is the proposed. Again, no changes other than adding a window in the center, but otherwise staying intact. It has good form, and it just needs a little sort of care. It's been neglected for quite a few years. And so the idea is to really sort of bring it back and let it shine again. Top right drawing shows the gable at simple gable form. Again, that back left, or I'll say, opposite from the Merrimack Street side, is the one-story additions that you see there. Those additions, some were older, in its, existence. It houses the kitchen. There's a lot of, structural reasons why, we wanted to preserve it, to remove it, excuse me. We did have a structural engineer come and help us analyze whether it could be saved. And really, there's not much to save. Lots of rot, poor foundation, subpar framing members, many reasons. So with the removal of that, it allows us to put back an addition on the upward side of the house. And then if we could just slide to the next set of drawing, thank you. So what I want to point out in the top left here is that whole one-story aspect that's being removed. We're looking from the uphill side of Plummer and looking to the back side. And what I want to point out on the bottom left is that our addition primarily is taking that simple gable form, and adding it on the rear. But being mindful of the original structure and also acknowledging its location on a corner, that it was important to turn the corner with a form that was strong but not overwhelmed. So what you can see is at the first floor level, we actually step the addition, the footprint back from the corner, 1'6", but then at the second level, it actually steps back more than that, at 4'3", in order to really pull away from that, corner gable end. And so that's where you'll see on that bottom left drawing that gable, and then with a one-story sort of shed piece wrapping the Plummer side and then across the rear. To the right of that, as far as a roof form, we have a sort of, I'll say flat, but there is a pitch to it, where we didn't want to overwhelm the existing roof. So we just, in a way to sort of be more discreet and less of a presence, we have a very, very shallow pitch on that addition. On the right side plane of that addition, it also steps back from the original form. So again, trying to give respect to the original structure. Another thing to note is that these additions are only of the first and second story. We did not attempt to go to the third story or occupy any of that. What I do think that does is helps minimize and keep roof lines as low as they are right now by not adding dormers, etc. So yet again, an effort to keep the simple form at its purest. And then if we go one more slide, just to touch on in the uphill side of the property, we've got a detached garage, and that is a 22 by 23 in footprint, with a little bit of space above it, which is what you see as the staircase leading up on that rear exterior. And this meets all the requirements for a accessory unit. And then if we could actually touch on materials on this, which are going to be similar, and we can flip back to one slide back, just to touch on materials. The proposal, the existing house is clapboard. We're going to replace the windows with a high quality insulated window. We're going to match the 2/2s where they are, and there are some small lines up in the gable ends that we will also replace, and then likewise on the addition, same level of high quality windows. There's a combination of clapboards on the original house, and then on the rear addition, clapboards and shingles, just to differentiate the added new construction piece. generally speaking, it's a small increase. It is over 500 additional square feet. It's actually 900. The current house is about 1,400 square feet, and we're simply going up to 2,300 approximately. Remaining as a single family, and hopefully giving it, this house has really needed a little bit of attention. And I think that this addition is a really nice way to bring it up to give it the love that it needs. And I have spoken with some neighbors, actually, I'll let Lisa touch on that, but some neighbors who are in support of it as well. And with that, I will let Lisa take over the presentation again.
And I just want to clarify, when Eileen says accessory unit, she means accessory building. It's not, there's not an accessory living unit in the back. Given all the discussion recently about that. So here's also a rendering that we've had done as well. So you can see, I think that this, particularly the flat drawings, are a little more difficult. And the Historic Commission really appreciated the renderings that we have here and in the next slide, because you can actually see how that lower addition in the back steps in. And there's that one story that's part of the 2-story L in the back. And then the next slide. And again, here is looking up Plummer on the left without the proposed improvements, and then looking up Plummer on the right with the proposed improvements. Also, I would mention, and many of you probably drove by, Plummer has an elevation change, obviously, as you go up off of Merrimack Street. So particularly when you're coming down Plummer, given the height of the houses that are adjacent and the strip down, it's difficult to see the back of the house. So the board has the authority to grant a special permit based upon a review of 2 criteria. One is that there are no new non-conformities, and 2 is that the proposed changes are not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. Here, there are no new non-conformities being created. There is the extension of that rear yard, but not to the same extent that the existing one does, as well as the front yard. If you could just go back up to the My Maps, Caitlin. So I thought it would be good to get an overview of this lot from the GIS. Directly across the street from this is a commercial structure. Many of you who've been here a while know that used to be a church and is now a daycare facility. And then you have an eclectic mix of different kinds of architecture throughout the area. But I thought that this was important so you could get an idea of where this stood. So the next is, as I said, the board can find that it's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. And as I indicated, that the neighborhood is a mixture of building types and uses. We've got the daycare facility across the street. Moving up Plummer on the same side, you have a converted ranch home, which is more than 60 feet, 4 feet from the rear of the proposed addition, and 19 feet from the proposed garage, where the ordinance actually allows 6. Further, as you know, when traveling up Plummer, the elevation increases, as I indicated, which helps to put into place, if you will, where this home is as compared to everything else. The homes across the street on Merrimack Street will not see a change, given the original historic structure will not be changing, except for they will see that that addition that sticks out on the side no longer will be there, so they'll see the historic box itself. Again, there are Capes, New Englanders, Colonials. There's a great mix of architectural styles in the neighborhood. Keeping all that in mind, as Eileen described to you, the proposed L is stepped in from the existing west side of the original structure and separated by a lower flat roof of the proposed addition. The design allows for recognition and subordination to the original structure. And successfully does not interfere with its view from Merrimack Street. And it is, its massing is appropriate to the original structure on Plummer Avenue. I think there were some comments from the Historic Commission related to that, actually, that the width of the new L on the back is the same width as the gable is of the original structure, and they appreciated that architectural detail. There's respect for the corner boards and the rakes and roof lines that can be seen on the proposed addition. Removing the haphazard nature of the existing two additions certainly will improve the area as well. I noted that you can see the relationship between the surrounding properties based upon the renderings that we provided. As a result, we believe the board can find that the proposed addition is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing structure.
Thank you, Attorney Mead. Okay, now we turn to the public comment period for anybody who would like to in the room provide any comments. We'd love to hear them. Would anybody like to say anything on behalf of this pro or con or whatever, this application? Okay, seeing none, we're still taking input online. Do we have anybody out there who would like to provide input? We do, so, I see a hand up. So we will recognize the applicant, the person whose name I'm not sure I want to pronounce. But if you could indicate, if you could turn on your mic, we'll turn you on from here. If you could indicate your name and your address, and then you have the floor.
Hello, my name is John Blyler, 3 Plummer Avenue, the 1854 Cape, not a ranch immediately abutting the property.
Thank you. We hear you loud and clear.
Good, thank you. I wanted to weigh in and ask a question or two, if I may, with regard to the updated site plan. So I'm going to weigh in and say, as the immediate abutter, we appreciate the relatively modest scale of the addition, Eileen, that you've drawn up. Thank you. And we also appreciate your submitting a revised plan relative to some current concerns that we raised on the existing site plan. So thank you. So I'm looking at the revised site plan. I don't know, it's the very last page of the document entitled 443 Merrimack Street Updated Package that was included. And I have a question or two on that plan, if I may.
I'm wondering if, Caitlin, if you could put that up so we could see it while you're asking your question. And I should indicate, by the way, this is not really a question and answer session. You can ask all the questions you want, but then we go to the next public speaker, and it's not that we're going to ignore your questions. What will happen, generally speaking, is when we get to our board member will ask your questions for you. So you'll get your questions asked, but that's just the format we do this in.
So would you like me to articulate the questions now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So again, I appreciate the updated plan. Thank you. There are 2 notes on the figure that I don't understand. One says 8 square feet gap. That's off on the easterly corner of the property, upper left-hand corner as depicted on the screen. And then there's another note that says 19 square foot overlap. I'd like to understand what those 2 notes refer to when it comes to the Q&A period. And the second question I have is, we have a certified plot plan for our property. It still differs for what we're seeing here relative to the setback from our property to the south and the property line. It shows less, this plan essentially shows that we have a little less property than our certified plot plan shows. That may not be relevant to the board in terms of setbacks and whatnot. I understand, the garage is 19.3 feet, but it differs still from our certified plot plan. And then lastly, just a minor note, our names are wrong, just off the top of the plan here. The names are incorrect if we want to have a correct filing. So a couple questions. What does that 8 square foot gap refer to? What does the 19 square foot overlap refer to? And does it matter that my certified plot plan has a different setback than this plan depicts? Thank you very much.
If I could just follow up with a question back to you. On your third point, or yours is different, is it just inches or is it like 10 feet different, or do you have a feel for how different it might be?
Yeah, so if you're looking at the northwesterly corner of my property, it shows a 6'7" setback here. My as-built shows a 7.5 7.5. setback. So
Okay,
six-
so
six-
it's.
So
it's somewhat-
again, I don't know if it's material for the purpose of this board, but I'm losing property as a result of this map is how it appears, right? Or as a result of this drawing.
Okay, well, thank you, and hopefully we'll get some answers to your questions here in a moment.
I appreciate your entertaining me. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else out there, Caitlin, who would like to be recognized? If there is, raise your hand. Push the little button to raise your hand at the bottom of your screen. Okay, seeing none, we shall close that portion of the hearing and go to questions from the board. This is when each member of our board can ask whatever questions they'd like. So we'll do this in whatever order someone would like to speak. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first here. I'll just reiterate the, Mr. Beliar's, question. Could you, Attorney Mead, explain the 8-foot gap and the 19 square foot overlap? Or what do you have to say about those things?
Right, thank you. Not being the engineer, how that arrived, they arrived at that, I can't speak to that, but what he's representing here is the solid line is the line that he has drawn as the lot line. And the hashed line is the line that is, I believe from the plan from Mr. Blyler, I apologize if I misspoke.
If I can just interject, when you say he, you mean your engineer?
I'm sorry, our engineer, yeah,
thank
I
you.
apologize.
Thank
And so the 8 square foot gap on the left hand or the east side is in, that's an 8 square foot gap that goes in one direction. And then the 19 square foot overlaps in the other direction is that amount that it goes in the opposite direction. But that's a discrepancy between the two plans. And as noted, it doesn't change the actual setbacks.
Thank you very much. I don't think that the second question that the caller raised really is something for us, what are his rights? I don't think that that's really our bailiwick there, so we're going to go on beyond that. And my question I had was, I think probably best answered by Ms. Graff. I was wondering about the status of the chimneys in the existing part of the house to be capped.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So the original two, there's one on the gable end on the easterly side, seen in this photograph on the far right. So that one actually is to be removed. In thinking about the evolution of it, it does appear that it was a later addition, and you could sort of you feel that from the interior point of view, and in particular, actually, probably a gable end view, you would even see it. The chimney goes right in front of that awning window. The chimney to the left, which is leaning, we'd like to repair that one, and so that will remain in some form, but currently it has some structural instability. So we'd like to keep that in some form, but just something that will be secured.
Yeah, understood. Okay, so the gable end one goes away, and then the one in the middle will remain in some form or fashion.
Correct.
So that sort of landscape or streetscape will remain intact. Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, and then the last question I had were related to the exterior stairs on the garage. Does that impact any way the calculations for the garage with respect to, because you're kind of close to what you could do without any sort of additional permit?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can answer that.
Thank you.
It doesn't, because they're not covered, so it doesn't count as the square footage
Yeah.
to the inside. And the setback is too far away, plus
Right,
it's an
right.
egress.
Okay, yeah, that's it for questions for me.
Does anyone else have any questions? Bud?
Yeah, I'll go. I'm assuming you've seen the two conditions they might want to add to this. One of them, they have to do with curb cuts. One of them is the curb cut on Merrimack would be replaced or
Correct.
restored.
Right.
And then if you do put one on Plummer, I assume you will, it can't be more than 18 feet.
So we corrected that. We made those changes. So thank you
Okay.
for bringing that up. Could you go back to the site plan, please, Caitlin? So Eileen met the DPW folks out there.
Yep.
And they wanted so you'll see how it necks down at the street.
Yeah.
The driveway.
Yeah.
And then the curb cut on Merrimack goes away.
Is gone, okay. All right, so if we put those two conditions,
Absolutely.
that's good. And I guess tree and sidewalk, although it applies, they said nothing has to be done. So
Correct.
there'll be no requirement there. I've got no other questions, Vice Chair.
Okay, Mr. Bennett and Ms. Gal, do you have anything?
I have no question.
All right, so that concludes our question and answer period. Actually, no, I get to ask questions. I forget, don't usually share these things. I just want to make sure we close the loop with the abutter who asked those questions. I think you indicated you have a different plan. I'm kind of glad to see this plan actually tries to show both. But from our perspective, you have an issue with them as to the plan, and you guys got to work that out somehow. It doesn't really affect what we're doing because the difference is so small that, it doesn't matter who's right here. It doesn't really affect the setbacks and the things that were, that garage, for example, is still a conforming structure either way. So it's not something we really deal with here. I just want to try to add that to what's already been said. And I had some other things, but they've already been brought up by my colleagues. So that will now close the discussion period. And now we go around the table and everybody indicates if this is something they can support and or not. And this requires at least a 4 or 5 vote. So who'd like to begin?
I'll go, sure.
Go ahead.
At first blush, I thought the addition was large. But when you look at how modest the existing structure is at, 1,400 square feet, and it's only a 900-foot addition to put it at 2,300, that's not a big home. And if you look at some of the homes in that area, there are homes bigger than 2,300 feet all over the place. So at first I was a little concerned about massing, but seeing the pictures, seeing the drawings, I think it's well in keeping with the neighborhood. I don't think it's more detrimental. And again, kudos to the architect. Beautiful building, beautiful addition. So I can support the application.
Who'd like to talk next?
Well,
Yeah.
I echo those comments, and I also would note that we also satisfy the first prong here, which is there's no additional new non-conformity here. So with that, I can support this.
Thank you for adding that. It's good to state the reason for making your decision. Mr. Delisle or Mr. Bennett?
I'll briefly comment.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Steve. I'll just echo my colleagues' observations. I would endorse the architecture here and complements the historic structure and respects the historic nature of the building. It's tasteful, and indeed this building is quite tired, and it's a true benefit to see this level of improvement. Like Mr. Shagnon, 900 feet on its face sounds like a large addition, but the total size of this building is like 2,300 feet, and the lot's quite big, and the scale and massing on the lot is certainly comfortable, and the scale and size and massing of the structure as it relates to the neighborhood is perfectly comfortable and compatible with the neighborhood. So I can approve this, and I compliment the team that put the application together.
Thank you, Mr. Delisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would echo the comments of my colleagues. I think this is a nice plan. No new non-conformity, and nothing that's substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, so I can certainly support this.
And I concur with my colleagues as well. So with that, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve, 443 Merrimack, ZNC 23-28 with the, two, I guess there's stipulations, special conditions. That the curb cut on Plummer Ave not exceed 18 feet. And said improvements would be completed prior to the building permit being closed out. And that the curb cut on Merrimack will be on the driveway curb cut will be restored. And again, that'll be completed prior to the building permit closing.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Prior to the building permit or occupancy permit?
It says building permit closeout.
Oh, building permit closeout.
Closeout.
So that would
So that's when it's
Yeah.
all signed off, right?
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bennett?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll call a roll. Mr. Delisle?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Shagnon?
Yeah.
Ms. Gow?
Yes.
And I'm yes. It's 5-7. It's approved. That gets us to our second topic, which is our 4th Street. Those of you waiting for 124 High Street, I'm sorry, is the last topic. That's the one. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, our 4th Street.
Mr. Chair, for the record, Lisa Mead, Tellerman Costa, 30 Green Street, on behalf of Matthew and Kaylee Withington. And with me this evening is Ben, who also worked on this project, and MPG Design are the architects on this project. They weren't able to make it this evening. So the applicant, the Withingtons proposed to construct a 1-story addition on the left side of their existing 2-unit condominium structure. And while this might seem like a lot of work for 176 square feet, it's really important to them being able to use and function in their home with their family. The project requires a special permit for nonconformities due to the extension of the additional cause to the left side setback. So this is a 2-unit condominium where the Withington's unit is to the rear and left of the main structure, which you'll see in a little bit. It's actually set quite a ways back from Horton Street. The property is in the R2 and DCOD zoning districts. When this unit was actually constructed, it was at the time the R3 district, just so you all know how that all happened. I didn't do this, but it was done by right apparently at the time. The property contains a number of nonconformities, including the following. There's 5,570 square feet of lot area where 15,000 square feet is required for a 2-family. There's 56 feet of frontage where 120 feet is required. Front yard setback is 2.4 feet. That's of the original structure, which is the other unit where 25 feet is required. The right side setback is 5 feet where 20 feet is required. That's on the opposite side as well. The left side setback is 9.8 feet. That's where we're putting the addition, where 20 feet is required. And lot coverage is at 30.5%, where 25% is the maximum. The property conforms to rear yard setback and open space. So this lot is like many lots in the south end that were all mostly R3 at one point in time. Presently, there is room for 3 parking spaces in the front of the building and kind of to the side that both of the owners use. And as I said before, Matt and Kaylee proposed to construct this 1-story addition on the left-hand side of the house. The proposal will increase the left side non-conformity from 9.8 feet to 1.8 feet, and the lot coverage from 30.5% to 34.2%. You go to the next slide, please. There will be no other of the non-conformities will be impacted by this addition. So as I said, they proposed to build 176 square foot addition, 1-story on the left-hand side. And the DCOD isn't triggered, nor was demolition delay triggered. So you go to the next slide, please. you could blow it up a little bit, thank you. And so here you see, that 2.5-story wood frame dwelling, that's the original dwelling. And then this addition was put on in the rear. And so this unit, 1R is the applicant's unit. And you can see the proposed addition in the kind of darker cross, hash mark on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. So here you have the existing, and this is just the unit because the connection is off to the right. So you have the existing unit to the left, on the left-hand side, and then you can see the small addition proposed on the right-hand side. There are no other changes to the structure. This is the front view. Next slide, please. And this is the left side elevation where the proposed addition is to go. Currently, you can see they have their entry on the left side there. The proposal is to put this small addition in its place and have the entry at the front. Next slide, please. And here's the rear. Again, no changes except for the addition on the right-hand side from the rear. And you can see how it matches with the existing structure. Next slide, please. And then this is the opposite side. And of course, there are no changes to this side of the structure. Next slide, please. So here we've stepped into the property a little bit and you can see the condominium in the back. And the proposal is to put the addition on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. Again, you can see a little bit further out. You can see there's currently a fence that runs along the property line there, stockade fence. That's where the addition is proposed to go. Next slide, please. And this is going east on Horton Street. And obviously you can't see because of the existing structure at the corner of Federal and Horton. Next slide. So as a result, the board has a two-pronged test. One, that there's no new nonconformity, and two, that proposed changes will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing structure. First, there is no new nonconformity being created. Next, the board can find, we believe that the proposed change will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing structure. We believe the proposal of 176 square feet is modest and less than substantial for sure. It is the left rear portion of the property and very difficult to see from the street unless you're standing right in front of it. There's existing screening on this portion of the property due to the existing fence along the left-hand boundary, as I indicated earlier. And in order to get an additional space, there's really no other place on the lot for the Withingtons to add an addition. Also, as you can see from the next slide, if you go to the mind maps, please. As you can see, they're really adding this addition on the right-hand side does not do much to make this house any different from any other house in the immediate vicinity related to setbacks. There are many setbacks that are non-conforming too close to both sidelines, rear line and the front line. So it is not different in that way. In fact, you can see 3 to 5 Horton Street, 61 to 63 Federal, which is the second house in on Federal Street, 7 to 7.5 Horton Street. Many other houses on Horton and Federal Street in that general vicinity have reduced side yard setbacks. In fact, many of them appear larger than this structure in and of itself, even with both of the units taken into consideration. The use of the unit is not being intensified. It's still a two-family use. The other thing I thought was interesting is we did a comparison. If you could go to, I think I have a table towards the end of go just down to the slides. That would be great. I did a simple comparison of lot area taken from the city's GIS system and lot coverage just by taking from the first floor footprint from the city's GIS system. And I did a comparison of the surrounding properties. And so in 1R Horton Street, that's the applicant's property. The lot area is 5,570 square feet. The building footprint with the addition is 1,905 square feet. And that is a 34.2% coverage on the lot coverage. 65 Federal Street is lot area of 3,790 square feet with a footprint of 1,479 square feet, which makes lot coverage of 39%, which is higher. 61 to 63 Federal Street is 4,835 square feet. It has a building footprint of 2,684 square feet, which has lot coverage of 56%. 59 Federal Street has 5,706 square feet of lot area, a 1,395 square foot building. That's 24% lot coverage. 3 to 5 Horton next door has 5,619 square feet of area, 2,100 square feet of a footprint, which is 38% lot coverage. And then 58 to 60 Prospect, which is on the other side, has 5,489 square feet of lot area, a footprint of 2,208, which 40% lot coverage. And so it's certainly not the smallest at 24%, but then it's the next smallest as compared to those surrounding houses. And so this is the south end. It's dense. That's what this is. Adding this 176 square feet certainly is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing structure. In addition, I just want to point out, if you want to go up, there you go, to the next slide down, please. And so here are some of the adjacent structures. So here's 3 Horton. You can see how close that is. Next slide. And then here's the Federal Street properties. Not unfamiliar. Many of you are familiar with that streetscape. Next slide, please. Again, 61 to 63 Federal. Next slide, please. And this is 65 Federal right on the corner. That's the proposed structures in the rear. Next slide, please. And then that's the corner again. The applicants did get letters of support from the 2 units at 65. That's what you're looking at right there. The 3 units at 63, which are the ones directly behind where the proposed addition is supposed to go, filed letters of support. And of course, the other unit owner of 1 Horton Street filed a letter of support. And with that, Mr. Chair, we request the board grant a special permit for non-conformities.
All right, thank you. So now we go to public comment, but anybody in the room like to come to the podium and make any comments, pro, con, or ask questions or whatever? Okay, seeing none. Do we have anybody online? If you're online and you want to comment, you have to now hit your raised hand button and you'll be recognized. Is there anyone? No? All right. Oh. So we'll close the public comment period and then we go to questions from the board. Who would like to begin?
I'll go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Delisle.
Attorney Mead, could you just go over the 2 the critical non-conforming pieces here, the side yard setback and the
Lot coverage.
yeah, lot coverage? I'm
Sure.
sorry. Yes, thank you.
So if you could just blow it up a little bit, Caitlin. So currently the side yard on the left-hand side, as you look at this, is 9.8. And the addition is proposed to be 8 feet wide. And so that makes that side yard setback 1.8 foot off the left side. So that's the increase in the non-conforming there. And then the other is lot coverage. So the 176 square feet added to the existing lot coverage goes from 30.5% to 34.2%.
And just one thing that I didn't really pick up from the presentation, and probably because you didn't have your architect here for this project, but the methods of construction, is this gonna have a foundation or is it just like a slab on grade, or how would this be done?
I have to tell you, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if there's many slab on grades. around, and nobody's here to answer this question. So, they may do a half foundation, but I can't answer that question. I don't know if we can tell from the elevation. You could look at the elevation a minute on
Yeah, I couldn't
the,
really pick it up.
yeah, maybe the other one is, yeah, pull that. It looks like there's a little bit of something there, so maybe it's a shallow, one of the shallow foundations, yeah.
Okay, those are the only questions I had.
All right, I'd like to go next.
I just have a few.
Okay, Mr. Bennett.
Attorney Mead, I just want to make sure, did you say that the butter at 6163 Federal Street have weighed in an affirmative fashion here?
Yes, there are 3 units there and they all signed letters of support.
And I appreciate your chart and it's helped me. I have just another question for you. As you wandered through the neighborhood, I'm curious if there are any other parcels where there's a 1.8 foot setback.
Well, Mr. Bennett, I didn't go out and measure them all. However, I will tell you, that the property, can you, do the photo from Horton Street, looking down the driveway? The old firehouse, that's the back of it right there. So it's pretty close to the property line. I don't think it's right on the property line. But it's pretty close to it.
Excuse me, that's the abutter.
That's one of the abutters, correct?
That's 6163 then?
That's 65.
Okay. I got it.
MEMAP shows that it actually overhangs
Yeah, you know, you
one
can't,
side of its on.
yeah.
street.
you can't rely on the MyMaps, right, without a survey. So that's not to say it doesn't, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I don't believe our survey shows it coming across. Is it right on the edge? Yeah, see, it doesn't come across, it's right on the edge.
Yeah, I don't have any.
I have a question. Could you go back to the picture with the 65 Federal abutting? And that looks like a garage. Is that a garage next door with a?
It looks like a garage. I can't remember. Is it, yeah, yeah, I think it helps, even though she's not the architect on this.
Hi.
There it is, there it is.
And I will speak to it only because I used to live there.
Ah, okay.
So, yes, that's a garage, and then above that is a deck.
Okay. And I know this is an odd question, but approximately the height of the proposed addition in comparison to the garage? Any idea
Can we
how?
go back to the elevation a minute? So it looks like it might be taller, and the only reason I say that is you see the existing windows. And if you go back to the photograph a minute again. So see that window looks like it might be about where that garage top is, right? See the relationship there?
Yes.
That's about as close as I can get as a comparison.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shagnon.
Yeah, I think, you know, probably most of the people on the board, their biggest concern is the, how tight this addition is gonna be to the block right next to it, firehouse condos. Was any consideration given to putting the addition on the back of the building? Because you've got 27 feet of rear setback available. Yes, the requirement's 25, but you can put an 8-foot extension there and not go into it too much. Is there a reason it has to be on the left side?
Yeah,
Versus the rear?
because of the function of the house inside is my understanding.
Okay. All right, I see the tough one, that's 9.8 down to 1.8. And I know the south end is, okay, I live there myself. That's tight.
Yeah.
No other questions, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Just to follow up on Mr. Checkman's question. Is the addition, got a landing area, entranceway? I mean, what's the purpose of it? What is it?
I think it's like, it's a mudroom and an extension of that kitchen.
So if you were to put that in the back, I guess you really wouldn't, wouldn't
The purpose.
function as you are seeking to function as. Okay.
All right, I have a question. Could you put the site plan up, please? Because I'd like to follow on to, Mr. Shaggin's question about where else could you put this thing? If it's a mudroom for entry, why not throw it in the front? There's a shed there. Why not get rid of the shed and put it there?
You lose parking.
How much parking is, no, there's a shed. You can't park in the shed. I mean,
Well, but the addition wouldn't be as small as the shed. And there's 3 parking spaces there. They're required to have 4. So they're already non-conforming for parking. So they would lose parking.
I don't see how replacing a shed with a mudroom causes you to lose parking.
Because it would take up more space, right? So you'd go into that other parking area on the left-hand side. So there's 2 cars that go on the left-hand side and 1 car that goes on the right-hand side. And so if you put that in the front, you'd lose more space in the left. You wouldn't be able to park 2 cars on the left-hand side.
I see what you're saying.
There's a picture of the shed chair on one of the slides, if you wanna see it. It looks more like a coffin than a shed, but
Yeah.
it's
if you
really
go
small,
photograph
one of the pictures. Um,
That one, the one.
Right there,
you
that's
go,
the
right
shed.
there.
And there's even a better picture further down. Maybe it's up.
There you go.
There it is,
It's-
there's the shed.
A box.
Right.
Yeah, and. All right, I guess my other question is, I mean, Newburyport passed one of the zoning bylaws that passed a few years ago when we did the one reform. Was on your own land, you can't have 2 buildings. They have to at least be 3 feet apart. And some of that was for safety to get through. This building, at 1.8 feet off the line, and you have this other building next to it, I realize you don't fall into this situation because that's on somebody else's property. But the same safety concept, you're coming very, very close to an impenetrable wall there, brick wall. And that's just a concern. I don't know, and you give any consideration to the safety issue of being so close.
I mean, from a building code point of view, that wall on this structure is gonna have to be built of fire resistant construction because of how close it is to the property line. So it's gonna have to be built in that manner under the building code.
I realize that. I'm asking a different question, which is, we just updated our zoning and said on your own land, you can't have 2 buildings any closer than 3 feet. Because the safety of getting between them. Here, I realize you don't fall into that constraint because you have the buildings right over the line. But nevertheless, it falls into that safety concern.
Right, well, you still can get around, it's all the same property, you can still get around on the other side of the house, right? So there's a 5-foot area on the other side of the house, you can still go around to the back.
I
On the
know
opposite side of the
that,
house.
all right. I have some concerns, but they're really not questions, so I will close my questions here and we'll go to deliberation. So who would like to begin deliberations?
I'll take a stab.
Okay,
So I think this is one of the toughest ones that I think, from my perspective, has come around in a while for me. Because I appreciate the functionality of the proposed addition and the modest size of the proposed addition. But it's the location the side yard setback and the lot coverage are really, really difficult here with this particular matter. So those are the things that I'm concerned about. Otherwise, I mean, so yeah, so those are the things that I'm concerned about thinking about here. So I'll turn it over to other members to voice their thoughts.
I'll follow up. Stream of consciousness. I share Mr. Lyle's concerns. I think it's pretty obvious what we're focusing on here. There are no new nonconformities, of course, however, without the intensification to nonconformities. I make a couple of observations. First, as Attorney Mead has observed, the homes here in this neighborhood, I mean, they're cozy is an understatement. Incredibly dense, probably the better description. And I recognize that, and I think despite my desire to perhaps see more data regarding whether or not we've seen that there are side yard encroachments, which compared to this one, certainly the one next door, it's just that. Whether there are others, I'm not sure. However, certainly it wouldn't surprise me if there are, given the density and the way this neighborhood is structured. I can somewhat accept that. I don't. My final comment is that the addition, in my aesthetic view, does nothing to the structure. It has a utilitarian aspect of it, and for that reason, I'm not particularly driven by its need or appeal. I think this, Mr. Delisle said, is a very close one. I think as I parse the standard here, I would find that it meets the requirements. Mr.
Shaggy, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I guess as I stated previously, the concern is still the tight side yard setback. I noticed in the report that when the house in the back was installed, it was an R3 zoning district with a 10-foot side yard setback at the time. So they installed it at 9.8, close enough. It just seems to me that that was, you know, the driving point back then when they got a permit to put that building in, to keep it at 10 feet. And we're going all the way down to less than 2. I mean, you can't walk between this building and the fence. It's that tight. So I like others, I have a problem with 1.8 feet. That's, to me, that's really small. I understand the addition is quite modest and small. That's not the issue. It's just that 1.8 feet, for me, that's the problem.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll.
I would echo those comments. I think if it makes it even harder, I guess, that the abutters don't disapprove of this. I mean, I'm very surprised that the 65 Federal Street abutters are, you know, agreed to this plan. Just given that corner between the two buildings is, you can't even get a lawnmower through there, right? So I don't know how you're going to, if there's a safety concern, how you're going to deal with that. I echo all those comments. I think it's a very difficult setback at 1.8 feet.
Thank you. I think I would add to that. I concur with a lot of the comments here. I mean, the fact that in the south end, many buildings way back when were built extremely close to lot lines. I mean, that was before there was zoning. Part of the reason the zoning was put in was so that it did not continue. And I have been on the board for several years now. I've never seen somebody want to encroach on a side yard setback anywhere near this much. So I cannot support this application.
Mr. Chair, if I could,
Is
you just haven't seen this application yet, that's. So, no, I'm just about the 1.8 feet. So I have a question for the board. I hear, 3, 4 of you related to the 1.8 feet. I heard one comment related a little bit to the lot coverage, but not as much. I'm gonna seek to continue this, but I do have a question related to the lot coverage. So if the 1.8 feet were not that, it were larger, or if the addition were somewhere else, I don't know that that can happen given what they've already gone through. Is the lot coverage a non-starter as well?
I'll go first. I raised lot coverage. I guess it would be a non-starter for me. I don't want to give false hope because I did raise that. And
Right.
it was an issue for me, co-equal to the setback. So I would say for me, yes, that would be.
I guess my observation is your chart goes a long way in demonstrating that, I don't know what your lot coverage would be, but it would seem like it would be an easier sell to me than 1.8.
I agree. I think the lot coverage, I could see past that if the 1.8 wasn't the issue. Yes, it's worse, but I agree, living in the south end, there are a lot of places that exceed 30%, a lot, and 40%. It wouldn't be a go to hell issue for me.
I agree with that. I think especially given the modest size of the addition, the lot coverage doesn't concern me as much as the 1.8.
and speaking for myself, that to me, the side yard change was so dominant in my mind that I didn't speak to the lot coverage, but I think I'm a little more like where Mr. Delisle is. I'm concerned about lot coverage. I mean, it's a very dense neighborhood. People are concerned about infill in this neighborhood. And lot coverage speaks to that. And yes, you can point to people who have built a lot of coverage 100 years ago, but we have zoning now. And part of it was to prevent, seeing how much we could pack into this neighborhood. So I gotta tell you, it's hard hypothetically to sit here and talk about things without seeing a plan.
Yep.
But,
I appreciate that.
maybe a modest amount, I don't know, but it's, I do think coverage is important. I don't want to say it's not important. If it comes to, it's a real measure of infill, in a very dense neighborhood.
I agree, and that's why in something like this, it's important to talk to the neighbors, which have all supported the project, even at 1.8, but I appreciate that. So if I can seek a continuance, Mr. Chair, to your January 9th meeting.
Would somebody like to make that motion?
Do we have room? Just,
Oh, yes.
yeah, okay.
Thank you for,
Well, no, I just didn't want to have 6 or 7.
I'll make the motion to continue the matter for 1 Horton Street, rear CNC 23-29 to the meeting of January 9th, 2024.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go around the room, Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yeah.
Mr. Shagnon.
Yes.
Ms. Gow.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. It's 5 unanimous. It is continued.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, that gets us to 5 Harbor. I'm on Plum Island.
Mr. Chair,
You're back.
I'm back. For the record, like a bad penny. Lisa Need Teller Acosta, 30 Green Street, on behalf of Lisa Nardone as trustee of the Lisa Nardone Family Trust. With me this evening is Ryan Clemens from my office, as well as Eileen Graff, who is the architect on the project. This project is at 5 Harbor Street. Lisa and her partner Patrick proposed to renovate the existing single-family home by adding 295 square feet to the second floor and constructing a new shed. Go to the next slide, please. The property is located in the R3 zoning district in the Plum Island overlay district and has the following non-conformities. Lot area is 8,430, where 12,000 are required. 55 feet of frontage, where 120 feet are required. The right side yard setback is 4.6 feet from the northwestern boundary, where 20 feet is required. And I might add that the proposed shed will be compliant with the accessory structure requirements of the ordinance. The property has 2 bedrooms and will go to 3 bedrooms, which is allowed by right under the ordinance. The home currently has 1,390 square feet of area and includes 16.5% FAR. Proposed renovation brings the home to 1,685 square feet. And then if you add the shed to that, which you have to, the FAR goes to 22.5%, still under the 25% maximum requirement. The project will not create any new nonconformities, and the property conforms to all other dimensional requirements. As Eileen will go through in a minute, if you go to the next slide, please. Lisa and Patrick proposed to add dormers on both sides of the existing 1.5-story gable. The exterior face of the dormer will align with the existing first floor wall. On the southwestern end of the gable is proposed an extension, but only on the second floor. This extension will replace an existing second-story balcony, extending out over an existing deck. The north facade facing the street, the project proposes a second-story gable addition over an existing shed roof. The addition will have similar shed dormers that Eileen will also review. Because of those dormers, the mean height changes slightly from 18 feet to 20.5, which is still well below the requirement. And then, as I indicated earlier, the proposal is also to build an 18 by 12 foot shed within 6.5 feet of the boundary line, which is compliant, and it will be constructed in accordance with the wetlands regulations and lifted off the sand. Can you go to the next slide, please? Let me blow that up just a little bit. So Harbor Street is to the right, and you can see the peach color is kind of the second floor changes that Eileen will review. Kind of hash underneath is the existing structure. The proposed shed is the peach at the bottom. You can see the non-conforming front corner of that house up at the top. And then while that is being extended a little bit because the extension on the second floor, it's not being extended to the same extent as the existing non-conformity up at that front corner. And if you go to the next slide, please. So here's currently the front of Five Harbor, and next slide. And here's the back front angle of it. Next slide. And here's our easterly side of the structure. Next slide. And the side, the easterly detail, you can see Eileen's going to talk a little bit about what's going to happen here. Next slide, please. And here's the rear of the structure. And that you can see that balcony on the top, that's where that second floor addition is going to come out over. Next slide, please. Again, this is another shot of the rear. Next slide, please. Again, just a little bit different angle on it. And then next slide, please. And here's the west side of the structure. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eileen to go over the architecture.
Evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So as Lisa has outlined, I'll try to walk through some of these changes that are being proposed, but to simplify, what we're trying to achieve here is that at 1.5 stories, the second floor is compromised in ceiling height. So we're trying to introduce some ceiling height by way of dormers. So if you consider this main gable that you're seeing from the front elevation there, we're proposing shed dormers on both sides. And the ridge itself does not change. That will remain intact, but it's simply the building height change because we are including the new roof of the shed dormer. So that's why that increased. But again, to reiterate, the ridge line does not change. And then if you see that shed piece, that one-story piece on the left side, we're actually going to extend the wall height there just to create another gable perpendicular to the gable that you see there. So with that, thank you for pausing on this photograph, but I figured it'd be helpful to talk about it with the sort of 3D aspect. So if we could just slide to drawings, I can point out these same changes. So again, front elevation is the top left, existing. And then if we look at the bottom left of the proposed, here's where you'll see on the top right corner of that drawing, one shed dormer that's following the west side of the property. So, and then on the left side of that gable, now you can see how we extended the front plane above that shed piece to create a gable end perpendicular to the original gable. And if you look to the bottom right drawing, you can see that perpendicular gable that's being introduced. And again, that takes the same character of these sheds that are on both sides of the gable. So another thing to note, as mentioned on the second floor, there was an expansion on the basin side. So the original gable took over the space that an existing balcony was and added it for a little bit more square footage, but it only happens on the second floor. So it goes over some existing deck space. So what you'll see on that bottom right drawing, there's just a hair more in extension on the top left, of that building. Also seen in that elevation is there's hard to see, but there's some vertical slat showing. We are moving an existing outdoor shower from the basin side to the side of the house. So that's what you're seeing in that deck railing area that's added on the easterly side of the house. But otherwise, that elevation is staying the same on the first level. You can see that sort of transom window, etc. So that all stays intact. On the first floor level, as I was mentioning, the first floor deck gets expanded in that easterly direction. And it was also important to sort of clean up the, I'll call it the procession weave from the, say, driveway side to the water side. There were, and we could go back to photographs and talk about that a little bit as well, but there are a lot of pavers and such that and retaining wall that are sort of failing. So in an attempt with this added deck, was to sort of improve that kind of deterioration along the house and that sloping hillside. So that's what this expanded deck is also trying to achieve. And the next drawing, look at the other views. Here's the basin side on the top left, existing. And then the same thing on the bottom left with the introduced dormers, with the second story addition to the right of the original dormer over the existing shed. And then likewise here, you can see expanded first floor deck with the outdoor shower also moved to the easterly side. And then lastly, the bottom right drawing shows you, thank you, Caitlin. The bottom right drawing is probably the cleanest in seeing that second floor expansion. So again, top right drawing shows that existing second floor balcony. And on the bottom right drawing, you can see it expanding as living space to the second floor. And then now we can go to the shed drawing, which is a small little structure, 12 by 18, just to provide more storage needs. And that on the bottom right drawing is trying to convey what that will feel like on Harbor with the two buildings adjacent to each other. So that's it in the smaller scale, just so you can read that together. Material wise, the front elevation that faces Harbor will all be in the wood clapboard, and then all the other sides of both structures are going to be shingles. High-end windows as well, insulated well. and in keeping with what's there now. So, with that, I can answer any questions should they come along later, but, at this point, I'll pass the presentation back to Lisa.
Thank you, Eileen. So with that, the board knows that, as we said before, the property in the floor area is currently 914 square feet on the first floor, 486 on the second floor, for a total of 1,390 square feet of offset in total. And then the proposed interior increases the second floor by 295 square feet to take it up to 771 square feet on the second floor. Therefore, we look for a special permit under section 21G4, that the proposed changes will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood or the PIOD than the existing non-conforming structure. And the proposed changes cannot cause the structure to be within 10 feet of the side lot line, or more than 2 stories, or more than 35 feet in height. So as to the second item, that's clear from the dimensional table and everything you've seen that we don't impact that whatsoever. As to the first, the proposed alteration is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood or the PIOD. First, as a reminder, substantially means to a great or significant extent. And when used in this context, we think that you can find that it does not greatly or significantly detract from the neighborhood or the PIOD. The property's neighborhood consists generally of primarily 1 to 3 story single family homes along Harbor Street and Basin and the northern tip of Plum Island. Those homes are densely clustered, often featuring dormers themselves, and occupy a larger portion of their lots. Here, the applicant's proposed work conforms to this neighborhood character. First, the applicant proposes to build its addition and dormers into the existing roof to match the size and capacity of the other Plum Island homes, including its direct neighbors. The current second floor provides little living area, and its low sloping ceilings, as Eileen described, limit its enjoyment. I might say that one of the driving factors here is that Patrick is 6 feet 5 inches tall, which makes it very difficult for him to stand up in much of the second floor. The additional 295 square feet in additional head height will make a huge difference in that situation. Also, you note the addition on the second floor goes over an existing deck, and it will be built in conformance with the requirements of the Wetlands Protection Act and FEMA. The proposed work fills the PIOD by reducing damage to public and private property by floodwaters and ensuring public safety by meeting those construction requirements. The extended house and expanded deck all meet those construction requirements. Next slide, please. Also based upon the reasonable increase in the modest floor area of the existing house, the applicant's proposal can't be found to be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. And as I said earlier, as the condition number 2, all the setbacks are beyond the 10 feet, except the pre-existing right side setback, which is not being extended to the same extent. So if you go to the next slide, please. So here is the MyMaps. We've outlined this lot. You can see it's a pretty good sized lot for Plum Island. And the house is actually relatively small, and we're staying within that same footprint, but for that little cantilever on the second floor. Next slide, please. And so here are some surrounding properties: 1176th Street. Let's dormer up on that kind of peak there. Next slide, please. Here's 1576th Street. Next slide. 33 Harbor, obviously much larger than what's being proposed. Next slide here. 19 to 21 Harbor, also in that same little block, also obviously much larger. Next slide, please. 45 Harbor, here's something more of a similar size. Next slide, please. 53 Harbor, again, much larger, but in the same neighborhood. Next slide, please. 1078th Street, larger, certainly, in a different way. Next slide. 2056th Street, similar size proposal here as well as the proposal. And next slide, please. Is that it? So with that, we would request that the board provide or grant a special permit to allow these changes and modifications to the structure, as we believe it is not substantially more detrimental to the PIOD or to the neighborhood, and that there is only the extension of that non-conformity along that one side. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Lee. Okay, this brings us to a public comment period. Anybody in the room who would like to come into the microphone and make a comment, we'd love to hear from you. Seeing no takers, is there anybody online? There is somebody out there, push the raise my hand button, but nobody is pushing the raise my hand button. So we will move on. And we'll take questions from the board who would like to begin.
Hi, Joe. I just wanted to go over how big the square footage of the building is. It looked like from reading just some of the numbers, because I don't think it's listed. The original building's 1390, and you're gonna add 295 in that. So that's 1685. Does that
Correct.
sound right?
Yeah, I was trying to find my final number, but that does, yes, yeah, 1685.
And the side yard setback, I guess it would be to the right side looking from Harbor. Is the smallest, I guess, is existing 4.6 in the front, and 5.8 in the back. That's not changing.
No, in
Stays the
fact,
same.
because that second floor is existing out over that deck,
Yeah,
we extend that just a little bit, but it's not to the same extent, because that goes away from that sideline there, right?
Yeah.
See, it's kind of sits.
yeah, it's at an angle. Yeah. I think that's all I have for questions. Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
I had no questions.
No questions, this, either of the other, if you have any questions?
I have no questions,
Okay, do I have any questions? I will say, I went by there this morning, a sunny day, it was a pretty spot, I'll tell you that. How about the abutters? Do you have any, none commented tonight, that's.
We don't have any comments tonight, we don't have letters because the Nardones are away. However, they were encouraged to come in here with something larger. So, the abutters seem to be fine.
All right, I don't have any other questions, so we now move to, deliberations where each person indicates what they think about this, and please remember our two-pronged thing, so our note keeper can get it the records. Who would like to begin? Go out.
I'll take a crack at it. I don't see any new nonconformity here. And with respect to being substantially more detrimental to the PIOD or to the neighborhood generally, I think that this plan, based on the generous lot size for Plum Island, that this plan would not affect either of those two considerations. So for those reasons, I would support this.
Yeah, I will agree. I appreciate the photographs which indicate the similar homes on Harbor Street, their size, et cetera, et cetera. So any concern regarding scale, massing, or inconsistency with the neighborhood is addressed by that. And otherwise, I can approve this application.
Shagnon?
Yeah, I have to agree with the other members of the board. I think the increase is modest. It's a small home to begin with. A lot of the homes out there, the old camps were small, and the addition doesn't make it that much bigger. It's bigger than it is, but it's not large for that lot size in that area. And it's very tastefully done. It's a nice change to that existing home. So with that said, I can support the application.
Scout.
I would agree with all of those comments and note that, it does meet both prongs of of our test, as well, so being finance credit.
Okay, and I too could concur with my colleagues. I just want to indicate on your photos, during the that, you know, I think there's some bigger houses. There are also some very small houses, and I find it more compelling where you just take all the above, pictures of all the above. It's kind of like you did with the coverage thing on your previous application. But anyway, setting that aside, I'm always big about the FAR. This thing, perhaps because of its large lot size, fits nicely within the FAR, even including the shed. So I think FAR is important to measure density. So I can support this application as well. So with that, I think we move to a motion. Somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve 5 Harbor Street, ZNC 23-30.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. Scout. We'll go around for a vote. Mr. Delisle?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Shagnon?
Yes.
Ms. Scout?
Yes.
And I vote yes. It's 5-0. It passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And that gets us to, our last hearing, 124 High Street.
I promise after this one, I'll leave.
So will we.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, for the record, Lisa Mead, Teller and Costa, 30 Green Street. And with me this evening is Eileen Graff, who's the architect on the project, and Chris Horn of Balmoral Development, who is the owner and applicant of this property. As you indicated, this property is located at 124 High Street. It is a current mixed-use property. It's located in the R3 zoning district and the DOD zoning district. There's currently 5 commercial units and 2 residential units in this structure. There's also an existing garage on the property. The applicant proposes to convert the structure from mixed use, which is non-conforming and not actually allowed in the R3, to multifamily, 4 units of multifamily, which is allowed by special permit. We have gone to the Historic Commission for their first review of this because this is in the DOD. The special permit granting authority is the planning board. So the planning board will issue or hear our application for multifamily house special permit. In addition, because we are making some very modest changes to the structure itself and proposing to construct a garage at the back and taking a piece of the garage off, another garage off, we have to file for a DOD special permit, which requires the Historic Commission to provide feedback. Generally, when we went to the Historic Commission, they said that, and I believe you have this in your report, that nothing that we were doing was altering the historic integrity of the structure. So if all these people get to review this, why are we here? Well, it's kind of a unique situation. We're here for several dimensional variances. And that is because it's non-conforming as a mixed-use structure that's not allowed in the R3, you look at the dimensions for the next closest, and that's how you get the non-conformities. However, when you shift to multifamily in the R3, there are actually more intense requirements rather than the mixed use. And so here, under the R3, it has existing nonconformities for a mixed use, a front setback of 12.6 feet where 20 feet are required, and a right side setback of 8.2 where 10 feet are required. Those are the nonconformities if it were to stay mixed use. However, when we propose the multifamily use, which is allowed in the R3 by special permit, it requires 20,000 square feet of area, where we have 16,571. And it requires 120 feet of frontage, where we have 116.2. And interestingly, it requires a structure not to be taller than 35 feet. And our structure is 36.5 feet tall. Mixed use is allowed to be 40 feet tall in the B1, just so you know. So that's why we're here. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So here we are. You could blow up the front a little bit so I can give an idea. So the structure, High Street is on the right. This is almost directly across from the Washington statue, okay? That's in the mount. So High Street is in the front. You have the existing structure, which the structure had a fire in 2001. And so when you see the rear photographs of this, you'll see that there's some kind of funky additions on the back, not additions, but stairways and decks and things like that. One of the things that Eileen is proposing to do is to close in one of those spiral staircases and decks in the back. That's that peach color you see. So that's the only change on the structure. There's some other ones that she's going to go through related to an entry and a couple of windows. And then you see all the way at the back, the proposed garage, which meets the requirements of an accessory structure. And then you see the existing garage in the middle that has this kind of funky addition on it that's proposed to be removed. So those are the only changes on the exterior of the structure. Otherwise, it's all interior, changing the commercial use out and then putting 2 more residential units in. So there will be 4 residential units in the property. Next slide, please. So I'm going to credit, I think, realtors.com for many of these photographs because I couldn't do them better. So here's the front of the structure, largely stays intact. Eileen will tell you what's changing. Next slide, please. Here's kind of an aerial view so you can see that the lot is rather deep but very oddly shaped. We'll talk about that in a minute. Next slide, please. And this is another aerial view. Next slide, please. And there's the back. So see all that stuff on the back? We believe that was probably added in 2001 after the building burned. Next slide, please. And you can see those 2 decks on the right-hand side, and there's a spiral staircase that comes out of one. Part of that's going to be closed in. That's where the addition that Eileen's talking about putting in. Next slide, please. And there's the opening garage in the back. Next slide, please. And then here is closer up. There's some changes on this side I'm going to talk about in a minute related to egress. Next slide, please. And there's that barn piece that's going to come off. Next slide. And then this is across the street from the mall. And next slide. And then the one in front of the George Washington statue. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Eileen so you can see what the proposed changes are.
We make again. So if we actually slide to the first drawing. Great. So as mentioned, the main brick form is having very minor changes to the front elevation. And this is actually happening just at the bottom left corner if you're looking at the right drawing. And you can see at the ground level, there's a window that's just getting enlarged. So there's a proposed window well there just to enlarge that opening for egress purposes. And that's the only sort of opening that's being altered on the upper side. On the right side of that existing house and over to the sunroom that's on the right, on the right drawing, you could see a proposed staircase. Likewise, there's an egress happening on that easterly side that I'll show on the next slide. I just want to point it out from the High Street perspective. Actually, if we could slide over one more just to finish that comment about that stair. Sorry, one more. There we go. Okay, to finish that right side comment about the stair added, if you look to the right drawing, to the left of the sunroom that exists, there is an existing opening that's going to convert to a door, a French door, just to access. There's this wonderful green space to the right. So that will be a direct access point from that level to the garden. And then also on that same elevation is a lower level window well being proposed on the bottom left drawing as well. But from this vantage point in the far distance on the right side, you can see the addition that's being proposed. And this again is on the far side of the building, but I just want to point it out on this elevation as well. But I will slide up maybe 2 drawings and just to discuss that again. So this is from the westerly side. This is the side that the driveway access point is into the back of the property. And right now there exists on the back left, on the left drawing, on the back left side are 2 tiered decks and then a spiral down from it. So what we're proposing is enclosing that space and making living space out of that, and sort of, I'll call it clutter for now, for ease. Take away all that sort of spindliness and just add 3 levels of living space. We actually propose to put it in on sonotubes and posts, and mostly because there are a couple windows down below, and that will allow some natural light, but at the same rate, it's similar to, in keeping with the structure that was added on the left side of the rear, which we'll see on the next slide. Here we go, from the rear, there's that 3-story tower, if you will. And again, you could see how the bottom of that structure is going to be elevated on posts. Again, in keeping with the sunroom that's still left, as well as that sort of bay window structure. The wooden structure that we're proposing will take on the same siding as the existing wooden pieces of clapboard. Will match the 6/6 windows typical on the building. And it will stay below the existing main roof, against keeping clear of that fascia and E-line, and staying away from the corner. That's another thing to note, is that we are staying away from the corner of the brick building. So really very hard. I think if you pause a lot, if you're on the sidewalk of High Street, you could get glimmers of it, but very difficult to see past the chimney as well as that exterior corner of the brick facade. The only other, I think the only other change is that there's a picture window right in the middle there, on the second floor, and that's just changing to some French doors. But those are the only changes on the rear. Otherwise, the rest is intact. And then lastly, we talked about that one, and then the next slide is actually the proposed detached garage on the rear of the property. 24 by 23 in footprint, with 2-car garage. And with that, I will pass it back to Lisa to finish up the presentation.
Before I go into the standards for the variance, if you could pop back up to the site plan, Caitlin, if you don't mind. I failed to point out one other thing. So you can see the gray area. That's now the parking. Excuse me. That's the proposed parking. And above you see white with lines. That was parking before. That's all going to be turned into green space. So the parking is all going to be pulled down. And then that area up at the top is going to be turned into green space. And so I just wanted to point that out. I failed to do that earlier. So if you could go now past the architectural slides, that would be great. So in accordance with section 10H6A, in order to get a variance, the applicant needs to be to show a hardship related to the soil condition, shape, or topography of the lot that affects this property specifically, and that doesn't cause a substantial hardship to the area, and that the literal enforcement of the provisions and ordinance would involve a substantial hardship to the applicant, and that desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and not nullify or substantially derogate from the intent and purpose of the ordinance. Here, and again, I'm just gonna have you pop back up, Caitlin, to the site plan. This property is very oddly shaped. The larger portion is adjacent to High Street, with 116 feet of frontage. It shrinks all the way back with that jog to the west, to the rear, down to 43.5 feet. And so you can see it's obviously very oddly shaped. The surrounding properties, now if you can pop back down to the My Maps, Caitlin, keep you busy for this last one. Right, there we go. The surrounding properties generally are rectangular-ish shaped, certainly none as oddly shaped as this. And in this instance, the literal enforcement of the ordinance would require the applicant or any person wanting to employ a conforming use in the R3 district to remove a portion of the roof of the building in order to conform to the height requirements. So anybody that wants to come in and use this building in a conforming manner from a use perspective, they would not meet the height requirements of the ordinance. Of course, this is a historic building and in a historic setting, further leading to the hardship in order to comply with the requirements. In fact, the DoD, of course, would prohibit the removal of the roof or to lower it to comply with zoning. The oddity of this application of the ordinance, given the existing non-conforming use, which governs the existing non-conforming dimensional requirements, results in a substantial hardship for any owner of the building wanting to change the use to an allowed R3 use. And while there are a couple of uses in the R3 that allow for a smaller area or frontage, namely a single-family home or a two-family home, and that's it, those are not preferred in the goals of the city's master plan to create and preserve multifamily housing in the existing R3 district. And of course, the height requirement for those are 35 feet. The unfortunate circumstance of the existing non-conforming dimensional requirements of the property literally will cause a hardship on this or any owner of the property. On the other hand, the granting of relief will be entirely consistent with the neighborhood and will not derogate from the purpose and intent of the ordinance. First, this is the R3 district. The proposal for multifamily housing is entirely consistent with the most dense housing district in the city other than the smart growth district. And we're only talking about 4 units. We're not talking about anything more. Next, the surrounding neighborhood is largely made up of multifamily housing on much smaller lots, but for the adjacent lot to the rear, which fronts on 104 State Street. Otherwise, the 2 immediately adjacent structures on High Street are multifamily properties and include significantly smaller parcels with the same or smaller frontage on High Street. Indeed, 122 High Street includes 4 units and has a lot area of 6,693 square feet. 126 is a half house condominium and includes 2 units on 3,950 square feet. And 128, the other attachment to that, that's to the left of this property, is 2 units on 2,760 square feet. We're proposing 4 units in the existing structure on 16,571 square feet. Finally, the proposed use would remove a pre-existing non-conforming use in exchange for a special permit conforming use. While it's true the dimensions are not specifically as required in the ordinance, the proposed use with the existing dimensions are more in line with the R3 than the non-conforming use and are consistent with the surrounding properties. Therefore, it will not derogate from the intent and purpose of the ordinance and will not be substantially detrimental to the public good. In fact, the proposed use and resulting dimensions, which are the same that exist today and have for many years, is the more conforming, less intense than 5 offices and 2 residential units that currently exist. It would actually be more advantageous to the neighborhood to approve the requested variances to allow the property to be more aligned with the allowed uses in the R3 district. And with that, we believe that the applicant meets the requirements for the variance and would request the board grant the variance.
Thank you, Attorney Mead. Would anybody who is here tonight as part of the public hearing, would like to come to the podium and make any comments? Okay, is there anyone out there? If there's anybody out there online who would like to comment, please press your raise hand button at this time. Seeing none, we'll take questions from the board. Who would like to begin?
I'll chime in. I just have a preliminary question. I'm a little bit confused as to what dimensional requirements the variance pertains to.
Sure.
At one point in the papers or in the presentation, it seems to suggest that there's lot area, height, and frontage.
Mhm.
But then there's another place where it talks about the right side setback. So I'm just
Right, so,
confused about which one of, if all four are, okay, I'll let you go.
yeah, so when I talked about the right side setback, that's related to the existing non-conforming use.
Okay,
So that's non-conforming if we were to keep it non-conforming use, the mixed use. 3 dimensional requirements. Lot area requires 20,000 for 4 units. We have 16,571. Lot frontage, 120 feet. We have 116.20. Height, 35 allowed. We have 36 and a half.
okay, got it. I will let any other board member continue with some other questions, and I'll circle back around.
And who would like to go next? Does anybody else have any questions? I have no questions. But any questions from Fred or Lynn?
I think that last question cleared my question.
I don't have any questions either, so we're back to you.
Okay, well, then I do have another one. So can you just, one of the things that you mentioned in your closing was the 4 units and the multifamily housing, and just to sort of understand, these are all gonna be market units, right? There's no affordable
No.
component here, okay. And then, so what would be the hardship then to the applicant if the variance were not granted? Because they could continue on with the non-conforming use, presumably, renting out the commercial spaces and selling the condos or whatever with regard to the residential space.
So the hardship, so we believe the hardship is because in order to conform to the ordinance, as opposed to continue with the pre-existing non-conforming use, any conformance with the ordinance, single family, which is a by right use, single family, 2 family, 4 family, we don't have the height. The height would have to be cut down, obviously, it's too tall. And obviously the frontage and lot area. So the
Can I
continuation,
just interrupt there for a
Yeah.
second? Okay, so with that, the 3 dimensional requirements for which the variance would be required with respect to a single family home, a 2-family? No,
the height would be required for everything,
okay, height, okay,
right?
okay,
So a single, you could do a single, and you could do a 2, but you couldn't do anything else.
but you would still need to get a variance for the
You
height.
need to get a
for those.
variance for height.
Okay. Okay. Right, that's interesting. Okay,
And it's because of the non-conforming nature of it. So if it wasn't non-conforming for a mixed use, which allows the height of 40 feet, right? In order for it to be conforming and bring it back, which is what the ordinance says, right? We want to get rid of non-conformities if we want them to be more conforming. This use is actually more conforming, but for those 3-dimensional requirements, which anybody's gonna have a problem with the height. So while the ordinance, and that's why this is so unique, is that the ordinance wants it to be conforming for use, get rid of the non-conformities. but it conformed to the dimensions, which you can't do. You can't have it both ways, right?
So that clears us of a couple of different hurdles with respect to, other landowners and, accommodations for this landowner,
Right.
because the height here is unique to this property because no one else is this high in this neighborhood.
Right, and it would apply to any landowner of this property. This is not about this landowner.
No, understood, yeah.
Yeah, so, and that's the other, would it be a substantial financial hardship for anybody? And the answer is yes.
Got it, okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? All right, then we'll move to deliberations. Who would like to begin deliberations? Please speak to the variance, criteria.
I'll at least try and start. If I look at the first criteria, conditions and circumstances are unique to the applicant's lot, structure, or building, and do not apply to neighboring land, structures, or buildings. I think the very fact that the building is already in excess of 35 feet fits that. This is a circumstance or condition that currently exists. Strict application of the provisions of this chapter, this is the next bullet, would deprive the applicant of reasonable use of the lot, structure, or building in a manner equivalent to the use permitted to be made by other owners on neighboring land, structures, or buildings. Again, I guess if we go to that, with the building being 35 feet, we were to say you have to cut the building down to make it fit. That doesn't make sense to me as well. It seems to be an unreasonable requirement to put on the property. The third one, the unique conditions, and again, if I go to building height as a unique condition, are not the result of the applicant. The pre-existing. The last one is relief will not constitute a grant of special privilege inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties in the district. Again, I don't think giving them this variance would do that. Those 4 bullets seem to apply to me. I guess I'd look to the other members of the board, hear what they have to say.
Yeah, who would like to?
I'll just, add, to what Shaq said. I think for me, the key point here as it relates to whether there's a substantial hardship or not, goes to the question of changing this from a pre-existing non-conforming use to a conforming use, subject to special permit. I think the ordinance encourages conforming uses. And once we take that as a point of departure, then the substantial hardships are clear relative to the lot configuration, the height of the building, its significance, the notion that you would have to destroy the building or reduce it by, obviously is a substantial hardship. I also note that we're not making a decision here regarding whether the permit for the change of use is going to be granted. I take it that's the planning board, which again makes our decisions, at least for me, somewhat easier. If the planning board decides that that's inappropriate, that's their jurisdiction. But certainly, to get towards the point of a permitted use here, I certainly believe the requirements for a variance have been met.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Ms. Scow?
I guess I would add, and I would agree with all those that, once you find a hardship, that desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent and purpose of the ordinance. And I would find that criteria would be met as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with everyone here on the board. And I think that, especially with respect to the second thing that Mr. Bennett had noted, where we're talking about the hardship, I mean, there is in our ordinance, XH6D, it talks about the literal enforcement of the requirement of this chapter pertaining to yards or other space relationships or total land area would result in exceptional practical difficulties or exceptional and undue hardship on the owner of such property. So I think the ordinance provides us with, with the ability to determine that this is in fact a hardship. And based on Mr. Chagnon and Mr. Bennett ticking off the other 4 criteria in C, I think I'm comfortable with this also.
For myself, I agree with a lot of what my colleagues have said. I would add a little, which is that, one of the things we do not do a lot of variances. But one of the things we do look at is this an odd shaped lot, and is indeed an odd shaped lot, so I would add that to the pile. And it's been discussed about having to chop off the top of the building. I think a point was made on that by Attorney Mead that with the DOT regulations, it's unclear even if you could take off the top of the building. I think that's an important consideration as well. So for all those reasons, this is a variance that I couldn't support. So.
And Chair, there was one other special condition added in the staff report.
Oh, yes.
That as we deliberate, I guess we want to make sure that the applicant's okay with that.
Yeah.
It has to do with repairing the sidewalk.
Yep, we're fine.
Okay,
That we would add that stipulation.
find its way into the motion.
Yeah.
All right, having said that, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move that the request for variance for 124 High Street be approved.
You want to include the shadow?
You want me to read it? We can order it. The stipulation.
Oh,
Special condition. The applicant shall reset or repair broken sidewalk bricks and granite curbing in front of the property in accordance with the submitted site plan from the Department of Public Services dated 11/2023 and in accordance with the specifications provided by the Department of Public Services. Reusing the existing on-site materials is acceptable for DPS. Said improvements shall be completed prior to issuance of the final certificate of occupancy. In extenuating circumstances, including but not limited to the seasonal constraints, an alternative deadline for compliance herewith may be submitted to and approved at the sole discretion of the zoning administrator.
Thank you.
I'm exhausted.
thank you.
Comfortable with that, yes. All right, so we have a motion. Would somebody like to second it?
I'll second it.
It's been seconded. So we'll call it all. Mr. Delisle?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yeah.
Mr. Shagnon?
Yes.
Ms. Scow?
Yeah.
I do vote yes, another 5-0 vote. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we have 2 other short items. One is the approval of our minutes from the November 14th meeting. Hopefully people have had a chance to see those a few days ago. Any comments on the minutes?
One thing I've noted, at least maybe 2 years ago, there used to be like typos and grammatical errors.
Yeah.
I don't think it needs any
She's
more.
running them through.
It must be going through an AI bot or something. They're very well written, I
It
guess.
used to
is
be fun to find those.
my comment. Right, it used to be fun trying to,
Yeah,
this could be grammatically cleaner,
right. No, they're very good.
They're very good.
So with that, would you like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
Approving that.
Approve, I'm sorry.
Second.
It's been seconded by Mr. Delisle. All in favor, just say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay, as far as other comments, I do have one thing I just want to hand out here, which is, I brought up at our last meeting that when we do get SPRU proposals, I'd like some legal input. So Andy today asked me to write down the questions I would ask. And if you could just take them and pass them down. Caitlin put the section requirements at the bottom of this page. Now, I just had 3 questions, basically. One is, can we turn one down? or because they've created this use to, do they automatically go through? Because I've noticed in the requirements down here, we think the character of the street's gonna be graded basically, if you turn them down. And I'm specific, so in question one, I'm basically asking, do we have the prerogative to turn one down? Number two, I'm saying if we do have the prerogative, it's on a SUS on a very residential street, is that reasonable grounds to turn it down? Because it affects the character, that's the only business on a residential street. So I just like some input here.
Yeah.
And question three is, if you have an SRU that has a history of complaints, let's say it's over, you know, on Middle Street where there's been some of complaints on, if that one comes in, even though it's a mixed street, if you will, with both businesses and residents, is complaints. So I would just like some legal basis from our, and when Andy asked me to write these down, he also said it'd be good to not only hand it out, but if you guys have any things you'd like an attorney to, if you'd like to add to the list, just send them in to
Andy?
over here.
Okay.
And we'll get some legal input before we get some of these things.
To your third bullet, because we had this discussion with some neighbors, because we have one on ours.
Yeah,
How is a complaint filed and who listens to it?
well, I'm just thinking if we have 3 or 4 letters come in here and say this has been horrible, and you know, here's what they do, there's parties all the time, and.
Right, so that would
File a
be,
complaint with Jennifer, is that how that works, Caitlin?
Do they file? I don't think many of them file complaints. Do they
like,
call
I know the one near us, there's been a police presence.
Well, those are, so,
So that should be publicly documented, but I don't know if like the zoning board or the zoning office would be aware of that.
yeah, it's true.
So it'll all just be hearsay, I guess is what I'm saying.
Not necessarily.
I believe you're gonna speak about it a little bit more. in
Unless we
discussion, but
ask
I
our police-
believe it is.
People come in.
People coming in, I think, would good. You know, if someone comes in
They
and
say,
says. this is-
every time this happens, there are beer bottles broken all over the street. That is pretty compelling.
I suspect that's what'll happen.
Yeah, I suspect that's where it'll come from.
That's probably our only leverage for what I would call a complaint.
I think probably.
Okay.
Anyways,
I just didn't know if the planning office has like a complaint board.
I think a lot of it's gonna go to the licensing commission. Because they get licensed for the short term business. But I think at your next meeting, we can have, we're gonna put an agenda item on your agenda to talk this through further and address the questions that we have.
yeah, I've really asked for legal input from our attorneys too, because it's.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, if the first one says you can't do it, it's a moot point.
Exactly. Well, I've heard somebody say that, well, the
That's-
city council's not allowed us, so you have to approve.
That's absolutely not.
Yeah, I find that hard to believe.
Well, I do too, but.
They still haven't gotten rid of the board yet.
That's
Right.
part of the reason I'm asking.
Even if
If
that's
you
their
look at
intent.
item number 8 here, proposed uses in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance, I mean, that gives us wide berth
Yeah, I
to
think
just make our own findings.
Oh, there seem to be city councilors that don't think we
Well,
have
then
a
they
choice,
should.
and I'd like to.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to get this back.
I'd like to get that clarified, that we have latitude.
Yeah.
With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.